Video, I want to tell you guys about Bisphenol A. Now, in my past videos, I've been talking about lead and other chemicals that were approved for use in America that turned out to be really unsafe. And I think there's a lot of value to that. I know for myself, at least, growing up, I had a lot of trust in the system. There's a lot of complex things that work very well in America. When you fly through the sky on a giant metal airplane, those are actually incredibly reliable. They're very complicated machines, and the systems to pick the pilots and have air traffic control and to repair them, all those are incredibly well executed, and it's safer than car travel. So I think by default, when I heard all these concerns about pesticides and food residues, I kind of didn't take them very seriously because I had so much faith in the system as seen by things like air travel that when it came to something so invisible as pesticide that you can't really see the harm of it with your naked eye, I kind of just assumed it would be okay. And I think that's part of the reason why there's this mass indifference, or not really indifference, but a really slow reaction to learn from these lessons from the past. Is when an airplane crashes, it explodes, all these people die right away, and it gets on the news. When a pesticide hurts people, it might give a lot of people cancer 20 years down the road, and maybe there's a lawsuit, maybe there's not. And it can be very hard to show what would have happened, how much better the world would have been if that pesticide wasn't there. And you don't even hear about all these pesticides. Hundreds of pesticides have been pulled out of use or deregistered for reasons such as safety concerns on people or the damage they do to the environment. But you'd hear about an airplane crash. You wouldn't hear about a pesticide that's been in use for 10 years being decertified. So I think it's really important to share these stories so people understand, well, actually, there were these crashes, there were these big failures and big incidents, and there still is a problem with chemical regulation. And that was all to set you up for the ones that are out there today, like bisphenol. So this is a chemical that is in everybody's blood. 95% of people tested positive for this in their urine. 9 out of 10 newborn babies had it in their umbilical cord blood. This is in all kinds of products you're exposed to every day. And bisphenol is an endocrine disruptor, meaning it acts like a hormone. Now, hormones are one of those things that might not seem that scary from far away because they're just tiny invisible chemicals. But remember, hormones are what allow somebody to have a sex change. So if a hormone can make a guy grow breasts, it's not something to play around with. And I think, people should be really concerned that there are chemicals that act like hormones in our dental fillings, for example, our receipt paper, in the linings of the cans of our food. So some of the effects people have found with bisphenol in particular are also pretty scary, and some of them make sense for an estrogen. Lower testosterone, lowered sperm count, fertility problems, hyperactivity, obesity, altered immune function, and over a dozen other issues. So it really, raises the question, well, why is it legal? The EPA obviously did some tests on this substance, right? They wouldn't just make it legal without testing it. Well, that's true. Unfortunately, this is a failing of the American system because science in the last 20 years has found out that the way we test chemicals is a little out of date. And in particular, with endocrine disruptors, it's not true that a small dose has a very small effect compared to a large dose having a large effect. It's not a simple straight line effect like that. And the word for that is non-monotonic or inverted U curve. And that's just the science jargon. The point is that the way the EPA has decided this was safe was by giving a large dose to rats, and they found the lowest dose they saw an effect at, and dividing by 1,000 as a safety margin. Now that sounds pretty reasonable, except for the fact that now for over 15 years, studies have been finding effects at lower and lower doses. In fact, 94 out of 104 studies have said that the lowest effect level that the EPA found a dose at is too high. And 31 studies found that the level that is okay, 50 micrograms per kilogram of body weight per day, the currently legal dose level for bisphenol A is too high. And moreover, a handful of studies have found that the current level in everybody's blood, which is on average 2 to 2.9, that can have negative effects. So if we already have science, and every year we keep finding, more and more effects at lower and lower doses, or things we hadn't considered, right? Effects in utero, for example. It's just raising the concern. In 2012, the EPA did make it illegal in baby bottles, which is, I guess, a small concession in the right direction. But that doesn't fix the problem if babies already have very high levels in their blood while they're in the womb. And that's when they're most sensitive. So this is not a small problem. And this is another case that I think mirrors exactly the ones I've talked about in the past, where the science was out there, but it was a little bit ambiguous, and the science got better. But even once the science got good, the government seems to be really slow about acting on it. And I think this is a case where, we really need to get the word out there a little bit. So I'll let you look up for yourself how to avoid bisphenol A in your everyday life. But I think the most important thing to really change the world is to put up a little bit more of a fuss. And I'm not saying you have to go bang on people's doors and scream that the world's going to end, because that's not going to help. But I think the way you can make a difference most easily is if you hear two of your friends talking about whether we should be concerned or not, you can just weigh in, actually this is a little bit scary, and, we've been wrong in the past a lot of times. And, this is an estrogen product. So you can, do you really want to gamble with that? Especially when sperm counts have decreased 50%. I think if people really knew all the facts, they would be outraged and storming in the streets. So sharing that knowledge is a great way to help get this problem fixed. Because the government will make this illegal, but they're not going to do it until you really get angry enough and vocal enough to give them no other choice. And another way you can help is, of course, simply by sharing this video and getting the word out there, getting more likes. It really encourages me to make more of this content, and it'll help other people on YouTube find this. I think, at the end of the day, we need to kind of recognize that chemicals are the new germs. They're these invisible things out there that'll get you sick, and they're complicated and hard to understand. And you won't see them with your naked eye, but you have to trust they're there. And it's something we're going to have to think about, That's going to have to become part of daily life, is considering how to reduce your exposure to this, just like you wouldn't eat dirty food off the street. All right, that's it for this video. Stay tuned for more videos.